Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with author, speaker, B2B marketing specialist, and outdoorsman, Emanuel Rose. Emanuel, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Dan. I'm really happy to have a conversation today.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. But before we get started, just introduce yourself to the listeners. Who is Emanuel today?
Today, I am an authentic marketing expert and an author of both children's books and marketing books, and an outdoorsman, as you described it. So, yeah, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I love it. I love being able to connect with you. One of the first things I want to talk about is your children's book, though. Again, as fellow authors, and it's funny you kind of cross genres, and I have done the same. My first two books were memoirs, but now my most recent book is a children's book, just like one of your books is as well. And for me, that whole process, going into, from writing a memoir to go into a children's book where you're working with an illustrator and kind of really working with them to see how the book comes to life, so to speak, because, a children's book with just words is not a children's book. So, I'd love to hear from your perspective, what the inspiration was, behind the children's book and what that process was like. And, obviously completely different from, kind of like how-to marketing books that you've written in the past. So just give me kind of like the whole package. How did it all come together to go into the children's book?
Should I give you the short version or the long version, Dan?
Well, yeah, whichever version you want.
All right. Well, my wife and I have talked a lot about the fact that we want to impact the grandkids, of course, like every set of grandparents, right? You want to impart as much as you can to make their life as good as possible. But we're remote to them, right? We live, 6 to 8 hours away. So it's like, well, we should be writing children's books for them, right? And then we can talk about the things that are our values and ethics and share that. So that was conversation early on. And then, a couple of years went by and I had just finished a long hunt. I was turkey hunting out in the northeastern Oregon, very remote spot, sitting by a river, Wenaha River, and just relaxing after having walked the death march for turkey hunting, right? Just like a 10 or 12 mile hike, and relaxing. I see this hawk start to circle. I see in front of me this giant wall. It's about 150 feet tall, and it's this gorgeous mosaic from moss and all the stuff that grows on walls in a river area, right? And for whatever reason, it triggered in me the Klimt piece of art called The Kiss, which is it's a mosaic piece, and then I just got into that groove of the river going by and kind of just spacing out, being tired. And I saw this hawk circling, and I'm like, Wenaha Henry, the red-tailed hawk, and the grandson's name's Henry. And so that was like, okay, I have a venue, I have a name, and now it's just about being able to write some stories and sharing it. So that's truly the inspiration, is the grandson and that hunting trip.
Yeah, I love it. And similar to me, I mean, my inspiration was our dog. So I think anytime you can kind of put an animal into that children's book is always gonna catch people's eyes for sure. So the fact that Wenaha Henry is a red-tailed hawk is pretty cool. So tell me a little bit about so once you decided to do it, then how did you get your illustrator? How did you guys connect? And what was your process like? As far as making him really bring that story to life through the illustrations.
Yeah, it's an amazing process because, like you said, I'm the writer and I don't have that visual artistry talent, and so in some ways I'm less than a co-creator on that and just more of a fanboy right? So,
Yeah.
because it's so dramatic and it's like, oh, it's like a brand new story, like you said. Um, I found him through some connections on LinkedIn, and then I said, hey, here's this book, do a couple slides for me, let me see what you think. To me, they're world class. The artistry is amazing, and it's not cheap, right? I mean, the it's a $3,000 or $4,000 event every time to have one of those books illustrated. So in that way, they are world class. And there's um, luckily, fortunately, he's Chris Acuna is the man's name, and he's a very good artist. He gets the themes, and he understands with very little artistic direction on my part. There's just a few tweaks and changes, and we're in the middle of the second one right now, and he sent over the first set of slides, and I'm like, oh, this I can't wait. And then it just like, okay, quicker, please, because I want to get it published in time.
I know what that's like too, because again, not being that artistic type, it's like you want to, you know, what goes into it, but yet you don't know what goes into it. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's definitely a test of patience for the author once kind of hand it off to the illustrator, because again, you think, all right, we should have this, right now, and I
yeah,
I know. I hope that I wasn't too much of a pain to my illustrator at times, when I'd shoot her an email and was like, hey, where are we
yeah.
at? Where are we at? But the, the end product was so good, speaking from on my behalf. Um, it was just amazing to really see it come together. So tell me a little bit about the storyline, um, of the first book, and then how is the series going to kind of tie together after that?
Yeah, the first one came about because it was actually forest fires that were happening in Tahoe a couple of years ago, and so Henry was nervous about the forest fires, and so I wrote a story about forest fire and used Coyote in a kind of a classic way of Coyote the trickster as the one who started the forest fire, and then talked about kind of how it's regenerative, and that was kind of the story of the regeneration of the forest and how that's important also. And then I also have attached to each of those books a pack of Douglas fir seeds, so the kids can read the story and then they have an activity to do that's being in action rather than just being scared.
That's very cool. I love that you're putting seeds in there to plant trees in the future. That's a very cool concept for sure. Where did that come about? What made you kind of add that element to it?
Well, I have a background in summer camp, and so I was a big part of the YMCA summer camp outside Modesto, California, called Camp Jack Hazard, and so that experiential wilderness training kicked in, and then fortunately in Humboldt County, I'm familiar with a company named Johnstein, and that's what they do is they package seeds and trees for retail. So they're like in the national parks and those sorts of things. So it was a relatively easy thing to get those two pieces to come together, and to have the kids have an activity. That's always critical, right? It's like you can only do so much intellectual stuff with kids. You got to get them doing something too, right?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that. So, another thing I think that we definitely have in common is just the love of the outdoors. As you know, my wife and I live in an RV, traveling around the country full time, so we love experiencing that and getting out on the trails, and kind of neat, that the inspiration to the book came while you were out in nature.
Yep.
So, is that something you've been doing your whole life, or when did you really start to appreciate nature and the outdoors?
I was lucky to get born into a working class family that my dad, every spare minute he wasn't working, he was out doing something like that. So literally I was just walking and tied to a tree by a creek. Well, my mom read a book and my dad was fly fishing. So I've been out, my whole life and been able to do amazing trips from New Zealand to Canada to Alaska, and as mundane as just going outside in the backyard and standing by the tree and getting a few minutes of wind in my hair. But it's definitely it's daily activity for me. It's part of what feeds me and helps fuels my creativity.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I would say, I mean, I was probably a later bloomer when it comes to the outdoors. I mean, I was a sports guy, so I was outdoors, but in a different way. Always on
Yeah,
a an athletic field. And it probably wasn't until we started to get dogs and we moved into a house that was in more of a rural setting, and really just walking them and starting to starting out just walking on our back roads, but then
yeah,
always looking to find a trail then to get off of as well. And it's amazing, um, again, how you can find inspiration by being out in nature and just connecting and that sort of thing. So I love being able to connect with other people who share that same love of getting outside. Yeah, I mean, taking a walk through the neighborhood is great, but getting out on a trail and into nature is just a really special feeling for sure. So um, yeah, I love that. And you do you know a lot of meditation as well and stuff like that. So what you know how does that all tie together to your well-being of just being outside, being in nature, and that sort of stuff?
yeah. For me, it's a critical part of being human. It's as important to me as the morning time when I spend meditating. So that's part of my practice is early morning meditation, work, midday walk and break, and then a little bit more work, and then socializing or relationshiping, right? And fortunately, I have a dog also. And like you said, he drives a lot of my outdoor time. He's a English Springer Spaniel. He's a hunting dog, trained hunting dog, and so the focus of being outside is my commitment. I'm committed to 1 week a month being off grid and camping somewhere and fly fishing or hunting or backpacking, and then the rest of the time integrating it in as I can, as I need to stay creative and stay nice to people.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's so important, because as a society we're kind of it's driven into us that we should be on the go, 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 constantly on that hamster wheel. And I just think that, and then certainly I'd fell into that trap when I was younger. And it wasn't
Mhm.
really until probably the past, 10 years or so where I really started to take a step back and take time for myself to recharge that battery. But it sounds like for you, it's been, pretty much part of your routine for a while with kind of growing up in that outdoor nature family. So was it something from your parents that kind of gave you an example of, hey, you got to step back and take some time for yourself? You said your dad would be fly fishing, your mom would be writing a book. So was that kind of where that came from, just wearing off from their example, or did it did it actually? I mean, listen, I'm assuming you've been doing it longer and better than me. Am I right in that assumption, or did it actually take you some time to figure it out too?
Well, I think there's two things in that. One is that I'm a philosopher by nature, and so in high school I got into Thoreau and the Transcendentalists, and so what I saw my dad and my family doing, that was definitely put me at ease, right? I had comfort with that, and then could dig in a little more philosophically and spiritually into it in ways they hadn't done. For my dad, it was like that's what he was working for, right? He was working his 60 hours a week to be out on the weekends, and I'm thankful that he did that for me. Um, and for me, I've been able to enculturate it into my life in a way that can draw from it and become creative. When I was in my teens, I was big in backpacking and did some 150-mile trips through Yosemite and those sorts of things. And then, most of us who are fly fishermen have some kind of transcendental feeling when we're out fly fishing, and that the power of the moving water and wild animals and that whole process. And so yeah, it's a blend of that and then a purposeful scheduling to say, I know this is important to me and I have to make it a priority the way I do everything else in my life that's important to me.
So how do you balance that then from, we'll say, I mean, for lack of a better term, I'll say your real job in
Yeah,
marketing, and
sure.
dealing, again, with probably a pretty fast-paced environment at that point. So how do you know, balance those two out?
But do it a couple ways. One is by scheduling, right? And to make sure that I've got my time blocks set up correctly. So that I'm working when I'm and working on client work and cultural work when I'm freshest and able to process all that, which for me is in the mornings now. And then to to recharge as needed through exercise and food and all those things. But then also what I've done is I do have satellite internet, and so I can't take that with me on some trips. And so I've designated some trips that are kind of like working vacations. And then some trips where I'm just completely off the grid. And so I just have to set my team up to not hear from me for 5 or 7 days.
Yeah,
So it's that level of purposefulness that is to me the only way to manage it.
yeah. So it really is a conscious effort to make sure that you're slotting it out, and again, communication with your team to know, you know, when when you're available and when you're not, for sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Um, so, in regards to your team, um, did it take them a while to make that adjustment, knowing that there's times when you really truly are not available? Because again, we live in this, instant gratification world where everybody, thinks that they should be available 24/7. So was it an adjustment for your team to understand, like, hey, here's a block where I am not available, or did it come pretty easy for them as well?
Yeah, for my group, because everybody's kind of like a lifestyle first orientation, especially these days, right? These kind of post-COVID days. So it is just about, uh, like you said, communication and letting people know that here's the calendar, and even on some days, like I'm blocked out from 2 o'clock until the next morning. So you're not going to get me until the next day, even by DM. So yeah, it's just about. It was pretty easy training for my team, but I know it's not for everybody, but it was easy.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. And I think, you said it about this post-COVID world. I think if there was a silver lining to COVID, it did give us all an opportunity to kind of reset and reprioritize some of our thinking. So if there's one thing that definitely came, was good coming out of the pandemic, was I do think overall, um, people are taking a different approach to their lifestyles, for sure. Do you believe the same?
Yeah, and the idea of um, this idea that remote work is the same is still work, right? Or remote meetings are still good meetings. And not that you don't ever have to see people in the same room, but there was a lot of wasted time in travel and cultural organization, that we've kind of been able to let go of and reclaim some time. So yeah, I think it's that part is positive. I agree.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's a little more novel now too when you get to go and meet somebody that you're doing business with or have a lunch or a dinner or trade show.
Yeah, well, that's one of the cool things about, with us traveling is, many different times I've been able to, you know connect with somebody like this virtually, do a podcast with them, and then, find out we're going to be going through their area, and
Oh yeah.
get together and have coffee and actually, spend some time face to face, which is a pretty, pretty cool little benefit to our lifestyle for sure. Because even with all the virtual and all that sort of stuff, I mean, there is no substitute for true human connection. And I think that's the same, when it goes to nature and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Like even here, like right now, you can tell behind me, I'm not actually in the RV. We're actually at our nephew's house right now. And I kind of turned his room into a quasi studio while we're here. But, me and the dog walk quite a bit just through the neighborhood, and that's great. But it's just not the same as when we get out on the trail.
For
So
sure.
even though you're still getting the fresh air, you're still out there, you're still moving. And luckily there are a couple trails that we can get to just by walking through the neighborhood and getting to a trail. There's no substitute for that, just getting out there. And I think that's what's, I hope that the um, immediate availability of these type of virtual meetings and stuff like that never takes away from that human connection, because I do think that's
Yeah.
something that we strongly need in order to just kind of stay connected as human beings and move forward. So, again, there's great benefits to technology, but I think you also have to, understand the true meaning of humanity as well.
That's true. Yeah. Sometimes you got to be able to get in the same room and catch up correctly. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's next for the children's book series? So you said you're working on the second volume now. Um,
Yeah.
you know, do you have a long-term vision, or are you just kind of taking it as you get inspired about it?
Yeah, I have a product roadmap being a marketing guy. And so got the second book is about it's The Secret of the Grouse, and it's teaching kids about stillness and sitting still. And it's kind of the setup for quasi meditation or prayer or those kind of spaces, so kids get used to doing that, completely disconnected from devices and other humans, sitting with themselves. So that's what this book is about. And I just published a book called Nature Bound, which is a book for parents on how to take it's 50 activities to do with your kids outside in nature,
Love that.
and from 5 to 13-year-olds. So I'm starting to this interplay between the kids and the parents, and mentoring both at the same time, because realizing that's also a gap.
Yeah.
Uh, and
So
then
is that book illustrated as well, or is that
no, it's
just
not
got?
illustrated. It's written for the parents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then the book that I'm working on that's really my labor of love right now is it's about how to mentor Gen Z, and how to bring them up as what we would consider normal human beings, right? Not digital first, but human first, and kind of meeting them where they are. And so it's for parents, coaches, grandparents is how I'm framing it, and to say we're in a mental health crisis here. These young people grew up in a way that has trained their brain incorrectly with the screen time, and social media has twisted their view of reality and what to expect from the world. And it's up to us as the elders, as their mentors, to meet them there and start drawing them out in ways that's going to take more effort on our part than anybody in our lives ever spent mentoring us.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that goes back to a lot of what I was saying previously, was about, hey, this technology is great, but you still got to have that human connection. And I think that is definitely something that, Gen Z is missing out on, is really understanding, how to connect with other human beings. So I think that's awesome that you're working on something in that regard as well. How many books have you actually published, Manuel?
I'm on 4 right now, and I'll have 7 by the end of the year, and then I've got 25 children's books written. So as many as I can probably get through about 3 a year, just based on the illustration timelines. So I've hit through my personal coach. He triggered in me. He kind of turned the floodgates loose. It said, let's get these things done. One of which is a book of poetry about nature. It's a book about my hunting experiences with no dead animals and no stories of killing, but just the experience that, triple rainbows and, those sorts of things that I've seen in moments of solitude that are remarkable and that most people don't get to touch because they're not out there in driving snow and sleet.
Right. And when did you publish your first book?
Last November. Yeah, that
Okay.
was the
Wow.
first. Wenaha Henry. Yeah, the first
So
one.
you are cranking them out. And I've published three in 3 years, and
Nice.
I thought that was actually pretty good, but now I feel kind of like a little bit of a slacker after talking to you with what you're
Well,
cranking out.
for me, I have a team in place that I could just plug this into the project system, right? And so, in that way, it's a little bit easier just because of that. But um, I think I've been sitting on them. These are like they're like half-born eggs, and they're just able to finally decided, hey, what am I waiting for? It's never going to be perfect, and it's okay if somebody laughs at it, but this is what I got.
Yeah. So has writing been something that you've done your entire life? I mean, obviously in marketing, you're writing business plans and stuff like that, but it's a little different when you're really tapping into the creative side. So, has that been something that you've always done, or again, were you a little bit of a late bloomer when it comes to the creative writing process?
I was one of those kids that was a journaler. And so I had boxes and boxes and boxes of journals and then when I would turn into my teens and early 20s, and kind of through that self-discovery phase, I kept a lot of those journals, and I trail journals when I was backpacking. And so it's always like I said, philosopher, more like for myself. So I was always writing, but it was never with the intention to share it with anybody else.
So was that an obstacle you had to overcome to actually start to share that with other people? Because again, that kind of exposes a vulnerability that is sometimes uncomfortable for us. We're
Yeah,
happy reading stuff that we think we'll only read, or maybe once we die, our kids and grandkids may read it, and we don't
right.
have to worry about if it was terrible or not because we're not around to hear the criticism. But
Yeah,
I don't know that people who don't write really understand the vulnerability that you throw out there. Like, so my first two books were both memoirs. The first talked about my 30 years of coaching baseball and softball and just teaching life lessons through that. And then the second one was kind of a memoir of our RV journey and the
yeah,
months leading up to that decision of selling the house and hitting the road up to our first 18 months on the road. So there's a lot of very vulnerable stories in there that you throw it out there and you kind of you're just hanging now. So was that tough for you to overcome and say, all right, I've been writing, it's been for my eyes only, but now here it is, going to throw it out in the world. What was that like for you?
yeah. I'd say it was super vulnerable, and um, it's always challenging to put yourself out there. Even like you said, even though I've been in marketing for over 30 years, um, that's not the same as my personal insights or my personal beliefs. And so, what I did is I have some kind of high level editors that look at my stuff as I'm going, and then I've got a really serious editor that looks at it before it goes to design, and then I kind of get just kind of made myself bulletproof on the criticism. Just said, yeah, everyone's going to have an opinion about it, but I know it's good. I know it's good enough, and just let it be good enough and not perfect, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So are you self-publishing or are you working with a publisher?
Yeah, at this point, I'm self-publishing and self-distributing, and haven't even been on Amazon yet. I'll get up in an Amazon store here at the end of the year for Christmas time. But
Yeah.
um, it's been a fun experience, been an interesting experience. I've gotten a couple clients who I've got writing books right now too, so I can help them use those as prospecting tools.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. It's funny when I first, started writing, I always felt that there was kind of this, validation if you're working with a publisher. And then I, I did work with a publisher, and it was an awful experience. so,
Right.
so I pulled my IP back from him and actually republished those two books independently as
Yep.
well, and then published a children's book independently, and really have no aspirations whatsoever at this point, in my writing career, to be tied to a publisher. I think there's a lot of freedom when you're independently publishing, and at the end of the day, the marketing, and again, unless you're someone who's already a celebrity and you're going to sell 1 million copies of your book simply because your name's on it, even if it's
Yeah.
garbage.
Right.
But people
Yeah.
like you and I, like, the marketing comes down to us. Like, it's literally selling one book at a time. So there's really no benefit, in my opinion, to being tied to a publisher. And I'm sure many people may disagree with me on that, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm totally 100% fine with independently publishing and moving forward in that direction. So like I said, it's always nice to talk to others in the same space and kind of get their opinions and see how they're going about it as well. So did you like right out of the gate decide, all right, I'm going to independently publish, or did you look for publishers initially? What was that process like for you?
For me, I'm not good at following rules and other people's processes. So I knew that
Yeah.
I wanted to write and publish the books. I didn't want to sell a publishing company and the fact that I'm going to write a book or that I have a book and go through that process. So I just did it myself from the beginning and just
Yeah.
said, if I only ever sell 50 copies, well, then that's how good it was, and I'll put out another version of something else. Just move with it.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Manuel, we could go on and on talking about stuff. I love the conversation, but there always is that time limit on the podcast for sure. But is there anything that we missed that you think would be important for the listeners before we start to wrap things up?
Well, I would just say I hope that you take your kids and your grandkids outside sometime this month on a little adventure, and it'll trigger in them new thinking. It'll make you a different kind of leader.
Love that. I love that. And Manuel, how do people get a hold of you? How do they get copies of the books? Where can they find you on the internet?
At EmanuelRose.com, and that has both sets of books there, both the marketing books and the children's and nature's books.
Awesome. So that brings us to our final question. As you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. So it's one of the little things that Emmanuel does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place.
I spend time every day thinking about and praying for the people that I interact with in my life, in my daily life. And so call it praying, call it beaming good energy, call it sending love or heart energy to the waiters and waitresses that I see, and car wash attendants in my life, and the people I play golf with. And I purposefully sit and pray for them every day.
Love that. Love that. Emmanuel, thank you so much for joining me. I love the conversation. For those out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com. While you're there, pick up a copy of one of my books as well. And again, Emmanuel, thank you so much. I really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it as well.
You too.